9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:06 and it's Friday, so it's time for KUOW's Week in Review.
Hey, welcome to Friday. Welcome to Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. It's great to have you along here. This is the time of week when we sit together for an hour and we figure out what happened this week, what it all means. We collect a panel of journalists to do that together. We've got Seattle Times investigations editor Jonathan Martin with us. Jonathan, great to see you again. Thank you for the wave.
You too, Bill.
Take that. And the words. Cairo 7 government and politics reporter Essex Porter. Good to have you too.
Good to be back, sir.
Always in his automobile or somebody's automobile. You could be test driving that thing for all.
No,
I know,
it's mine. It's mine.
Okay. By the way, I know this because I see all my guests. We're live streaming the show on YouTube and Facebook, and you can join us online by searching for KUOW Public Radio. We also have from the Seattle Gay News, Tacoma Weekly, and the Capitol Hill Seattle blog, contributing writer Renee Raketty. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on, Renee.
Thank you for having me back on the program.
It's a pleasure. How y'all feeling about an inch and a half of rain or so this weekend? How's that sitting with you?
I'm super excited. I'm ready to get out there, jump in some puddles, get wet.
Yes. I guess we've got very windy conditions coming this weekend too. It's going to be all stormy, but rain and is going to mean some snow on Mount Rainier. It's been embarrassing to see Mount Rainier naked, so I'm kind of looking forward to that, to her covering up, to him covering up. Although I did read that it's not just bare rock that I was looking at, that the lack of snow reveals some dark glacier ice, so it's not quite as bad as it looked. You know, it actually, I know summer, I shouldn't declare it over, right? The drought and fire season is not quite over yet. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
I think
in fact, you remember last year in 2020, it was late September that we had all that smoke. So we got to remember that it's not over yet. You know, it's 2021 is still going. We had some incredible fires that blew from California and Oregon. And we've had some pretty mild fires in Western Washington this year, thank God. But as we know, except for 2019, the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency said that 4 out of 5 of the past summers have been the most significant as far as smoke events. So this is something we need to continue to watch. Obviously, we have to express some concern about, what's happening with our environment. Summers are drier, warmer weather is lasting longer. So wildfire smoke will likely be more commonplace and a concern for us going forward.
I think a lot of us, at our age, we're feeling that, yes, there's going to be climate change, but it's not going to be necessarily so dramatic during our time. We were trying to prevent climate change from being more dramatic decades from now, but it seems very dramatic now. I was driving across the country the week just before Labor Day. The weather was beautiful. It would have been clear, cloudless skies, but when you got to Eastern Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, you could just tell there was a lot of wildfire smoke in the air, just a brown haze for that entire portion of the trip. And it's just that climate change is more immediate than we've been hoping for.
And we had some smoke at higher altitudes, which led to the most beautiful sunsets I've seen in years. And I definitely got my camera out and took some pictures of all that.
And we shouldn't forget, really, the aftermath of those hurricanes and storms in the South and the East Coast, which were devastating there. Again, storms powered by the extra heat in the atmosphere.
The good news is that the wildfire season in Western Washington appears to be over with this rain, as my colleague Evan Bush reported this week. But we really did get pretty lucky in Western Washington. It was not as bad of a smoke season as it certainly was last year. I think maybe the early closure of state lands may have made a difference. Lots of fires are caused by us, and we also, frankly, I think, got lucky. There's a fair portion of wildfires that also start by lightning. Those fires that really choked in Winthrop, so the smoke was like Mordor in Winthrop and Okanagan, was started by wildfires. But I think we may have maybe dodged a bullet, at least for now, on more smoke being being around us.
Yeah, the state public lands commissioner gave some credit to an expanded firefighting air fleet. But I talked to someone named Vaughn Cork from the Natural Resource Department. He told me mostly it was atmospheric flow. We typically get wind, onshore moving in from the ocean. That's not unusual, but he was surprised that we didn't have any significant offshore flow events. We never really had that switch, which usually happens at some point. So that not only did that keep the smoke from blowing in from eastern Washington, Oregon, BC, we also the fact that the air coming over the ocean is moist. We didn't dry out our western Washington moss and lichens and forest litter, which when it dries out is real fuel. So he was saying the way he said was everything lined up just right, and he used the analogy of Swiss cheese, that we used to have lots of layers of protection against a smoky summer. We've just got a certain amount of fuel. We've got a topography helping us out. We've got weather patterns. We got firefighters, staff, and no layer is perfect. They've got holes in them like Swiss cheese, but if you layer them all on top of each other, those holes almost never line up. But now we're in a situation, the drought and the heat have made it so all those layers are less protective. So we've got less cheese and more hole. Welcome to Puget Sound region. Less cheese, more hole. Okay, well, here's, I'm also looking forward to jumping in some puddles, just like you, Renee. This is a kind of a good segue to our first big news topic of the week, because I do think the pandemic is about to get harder, just because it is getting wetter and colder outside. And that's just going to make it harder to dodge that virus.
And I think a winter surge, is expected, is probably coming. And that means that we're likely to see a strain on our healthcare system that other states have experienced, like Idaho and, other parts of the country, especially where, vaccination and masks are more lax.
Yes, that's right. Do you know where your proof of vaccine is?
I have it.
You do?
I have it.
I was in New York. I was in New York where they require the vaccine proof to go into places, to eat places. They have their own little app. So I have mine on the New York app where you have your driver's license and a picture of your vaccine card.
Yeah, just showing a picture of the vaccine card seems a little bit strange to me. I am kind of wondering about this vaccine passport model that has been talked about. I don't know. Does it seem weird? Like that just seems like kind of like thin proof that you're vaccinated, just showing a picture. It's odd.
That's the criticism of the New York app. It actually is pretty thin proof, but it does make it convenient for you to have both your ID and your vaccine card available. But it's Washington State apparently is working on a different voluntary app with the governor's latest announcement, and it'll be interesting to see how that ties into your statewide vaccine record that you can access online.
For those who don't know, Renee, I didn't really make it clear that this is, I bring this up because King County is requiring this proof of either vaccination or a recent negative COVID test starting late October. If you want to go not into a supermarket, but into a restaurant, not outdoor dining, but restaurant, gyms, theaters. So that's coming in late October. Yes, Renee, you were saying.
Yeah, a lot of restaurants and clubs here on Capitol Hill and in Seattle have already been requiring proof of vaccination, showing your card. I've had to do it several times. I'm more than happy to do that. And if it keeps us from having a surge, at least here in Seattle, then I'm more than happy to do it. I certainly don't want to end up in places like Cowlitz County where they're declaring an emergency because their morgues are full and their funeral homes are at capacity. So whatever we can do here in Seattle, I'm willing to help. And I hope the rest of the state will follow along, because obviously we're seeing in those outlying areas, a lot of people who are not willing to put a mask on or get vaccinated, which is where we're seeing the rise in COVID rates.
Mm-hmm. Well, Seattle's mayor thinks that Renee is in the majority in Seattle. That Mayor Durkin says she doesn't expect restaurants and concert goers and bar patrons to revolt against this rule.
People are used to, before you can go into a bar, you got to show ID. And so part of showing the ID is showing here's something that shows I'm 21 and here's showing that I've got that I'm vaccinated. So I think if there are problems, we will do what we need to do to protect those businesses who are doing the right thing. Again, I'm really hopeful that we won't have those problems. They've been very infrequent in the city of Seattle. No one should be harassed for doing their job, particularly when their job is doing something trying to keep everybody else safe.
Our reporter Eilish O'Neill was talking about this morning and saying that apparently you're going to see complaint-based enforcement. So probably less enforcement in the areas of King County where people are not, they're not turning in businesses for not enforcing this. Does that make any, that was convoluted, but that in, for example, if in Enumclaw, if people are less likely to mind that this restaurant is not checking vaccine proof, well, then maybe they're not going to report that business and it's going to be sort of allowed to go on more so than in a place like Seattle.
This probably takes a lot of weight off restaurant owners and club owners, and because instead of having to do a voluntary enforcement and you have occasional person that objects to it, now you just say, this is the rule, I'm enforcing the rule, and have a uniformity about it.
Yeah,
Although we do hear
yeah.
from, I was about to say, we do hear from the restaurant and hospitality representatives that they feel like restaurants especially have carried too much of the burden, and that they're already doing a good job, that it's other businesses that need to carry more of the burden. Of focus always seems to be on restaurants and hospitality.
And I do understand there will be some difference in enforcement between larger restaurants and smaller restaurants. And I believe the smaller restaurants have maybe until December to comply. Maybe Essex or Jonathan can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's phased in. I think you're right about December for smaller restaurants. The Hospitality Association said, they issued a statement and said COVID spreads everywhere, and any policy to reduce the spread must similarly apply everywhere. Anything less than that amounts to using our industry, which has been the hardest hit by far, as a carrot and stick for the small percentage of people in King County who've been unwilling to be vaccinated. But, on the other hand, there is the fact that people don't eat with masks on, and I find it much easier to distance in my grocery store, which won't have to comply with this, than in, packed in a theater, or people huffing, puffing in a gym, or, people in a bar or a restaurant. So I'm
thinking about why it is that Seattle's been in basically a COVID bubble. We've had extraordinarily low case rates, very high vaccination rates. I think Seattleites are kind of tend to be rule followers. All you have to do is stand at an intersection downtown and see the lack of jaywalkers but I also think that, because we were the first in the nation here with a significant outbreak, the image of those ambulances lined up outside of Life Care of Kirkland was kind of an image that was seared on us early on, and it was very real very soon for us.
Do you think, Essex, that these state workers, because all state workers now are going to have to, they have a vaccine mandate without the possibility of just showing a negative test. And there's a lawsuit, mostly from state troopers and prison guards, but there's some ferry workers. There's a UW Medicine employee, and they are challenging this lawsuit, or challenging the mandate from the governor. What is their case, basically?
Well, in this particular lawsuit, they're challenging it on a number of grounds, a number of what they believe are constitutional grounds. They say that in contravention of the Washington Constitution, it requires an invasion of the person, an invasion of the citizen's bodily integrity. That's what they call the vaccine. When I covered this, I spoke with constitutional lawyer Jeffrey Needle, and he said that this particular lawsuit, the way it is drafted, he said it's really one of the more poorly drafted constitutional challenges he's seen in a long time. He thinks there might be a way to challenge the mandate, but he doesn't think this lawsuit does a very good job of it, because it kind of just piles on stuff like the right to assembly and the right to privacy and free speech, which don't seem to have much to do with vaccines. The other thing he talks about is that it has a lot of plaintiffs. There are the named plaintiffs that you see at the very top of the lawsuit, but there's a total of 90 people who are named in the lawsuit. And then they also say, we may want to amend it to add 30 to 50,000 more people. So, the lawsuit, definitely will have its challenges. And the governor's been challenged a lot of times on his COVID emergency proclamations, and he hasn't lost a case in court yet.
A lot of the people, go ahead, Jonathan.
Really, the governor does have pretty broad public health powers, and granted by the legislature. It should be pointed out that he's used these emergency powers, of course, in ways that are controversial. I think we have one of the strictest mandates in the country for vaccination, that I think even if they should prevail in this lawsuit in Walla Walla, it would of course head straight to the state Supreme Court. And the state Supreme Court is a pretty liberal composition right now, quite liberal composition, and has been deferential to executive power. So not playing lawyer here on radio, but that's the read I'm getting.
The vast majority of the people I think in this lawsuit are probably prison guards. This was filed in Walla Walla County, and Walla Walla State Prison is the largest, prison and employer, in Washington State among the government employees. And, one thing that concerns me is that, our correction facilities are about 50% unvaccinated. A lot of those folks include corrections officers. And so what happens, I'm concerned that if, October 18th comes, the deadline for these folks to get vaccinated, and they have to go on unpaid leave, or, they get terminated, what does that do for the safety of prisoners in our, corrections facilities? It could lead to unsafe conditions. We could have officers, other corrections officers walking off the job because of those conditions. The same thing is true with other first responders. We need our state patrol. We need our state police officers. We need them to be able to respond to emergencies, to be there for the public. And what happens, if a unit or a precinct, has an outbreak of COVID, we need them to be there. We need those response times to be low. And if folks aren't willing to take, just the bare minimum of getting vaccinated, I do have sympathy for people who have a, long religious objection. But, but unfortunately, I don't think that's the vast majority of people. And so I'm surprised to see we've had, almost 5,000. We had 4,799 people apply for an exemption to, the vaccination requirement so far, based on medical or, religious exemptions. But, when it comes to first responders, I'm sorry, I hate to go on a limb here and be unjournalistic, but I'm kind of offended that they're putting the public health at risk.
There is a game of political chicken being played here. I mean, the mandate obviously makes sense from a public health perspective, but if you have, say, Washington's always struggling to have ferry workers, and we see cancellation of ferry runs often because workers don't show up; they're not Coast Guard certified. When you think about the workers being willing to say, we will not just walk off the job, we'll be fired in mass in this date on October 18th. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because the individual agencies, as far as I understand it, the granting of exemptions is up to the individual agencies, and then the disciplinary actions as a result of violating the policy is up to the individual agencies. So I think we should watch closely about how the enforcement of this actually plays out when the rubber hits the road and these agencies realize they may be suddenly losing 5, 8, 10% of their workforce.
Yeah, maybe they'll be more willing to make those accommodations, because right now you can get an exemption and still lose your job if your employer says that they can't accommodate you. They can't make your job work in a way that keeps people safe. I don't think everybody knows that.
No, we can't have officers who aren't willing to go out into the street and interact with the public. Desk duty does not work for the vast majority of patrol officers.
Why is it that, Jonathan, do you know why they're not allowing proof of antibody tests? Is it a way of saying, I don't want this vaccine, but I have some protection, because I've had the disease? Is that going to be allowed?
It is an interesting, I've been thinking about that recently. I always like to think of third way politics, and, the antibody, an antibody test that shows you have a level of antibodies that provides protection could be a way around this. The research on antibody tests is not nearly as clear as the vaccine. So say that I'm not advocating for an antibody test without the research behind it. However, if the research does become clearer, it would seem to be an antibody levels at a level that which you actually have protection could be a more effective way of preventing COVID than a recent test. You think about, you can take a test and 5 minutes later catch COVID, and it incubates in you. So I think the research on the antibody test is going to be interesting to watch in this mandate conversation.
One of the things I'd like to know more about when it comes to the antibody test is how effective is that compared to the vaccine? If someone actually gets COVID, how effective is that at keeping that person from spreading COVID? Because the vaccine may be better at keeping you from spreading COVID, not perfect, but better. And Governor Inslee gets this question. He's gotten it a couple of times, was asked just last week, and he tells a story of attending a corrections officer's funeral. He says that corrections officer tested negative 30 times before catching COVID, and then ended up dying from COVID. So for him, the tests are not nearly effective enough, and that's his explanation for why testing is not part of the choice.
We've got to move on here with the week in review. Just in case you're just joining us, that test is one of the things you can show in King County starting late next month. You can show a negative COVID test within 72 hours to get into a bar, a restaurant, a show, a theater, a gym, and that starts October 25th. Finally, something we're watching is that I believe he's the highest paid employee in the state of Washington, the head football coach of the Washington State Cougars. The Cougars don't know if they're going to need a head football coach soon, because all he has said is that he's not going to get the vaccine. He won't say why. He said he's going to comply, but he didn't say he's going to comply by getting a shot. So I don't know if he's going to get an exemption. I don't know if he's going to get an accommodation, but that's a football. One note that a lot of Cougar fans, I'm sure, will be watching. We'll see if we find something out before the Apple Cup. Okay, we're going to roll on in just a moment here with the week in review with Jonathan Martin and Essex Porter and Renee Raketty. We are on Facebook and YouTube. You can search KOW Public Radio and watch the show there. We'll be right back.
.949 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. Stick with us after a week in review for BBC NewsHour. Here's Julian Marshall with a preview.
On today's program, Russians go to the polls and Google and Apple remove an opposition tactical voting app under pressure from the Kremlin, and how they're protecting the world's biggest trees from wildfires in California.
That's BBC NewsHour this afternoon at 1 o'clock, right after Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from Stride Physio, where PTs are devoted to empowering clients through physical therapy and wellness services. One-on-one collaboration helps guide clients from pain, injury, and movement dysfunction towards improved health and performance goals. Learn more at strideseattle.com.
It's 12:30, and it's KUOW's Week in Review.
This is Bill Radke. I'm glad you're listening. You, along with Chris Sombrosky of Everett, can watch the show on YouTube or Facebook, assuming that Chris has excellent YouTube streaming capability in space. This is a data engineer from Everett who is orbiting Earth right now. Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, actually got Elon Musk is a billionaire, but his company got another billionaire to pay for this. It's a charity event. The founder of a payments processing company paid an estimated $100 million. We don't know. And they also held a lottery to see who gets to go up. So this Everett data manager, Chris Sombrosky, actually lost the lottery, but a college buddy of his won the lottery and gave him the ticket. Maybe
it's
sold
great
him
to
the
have
ticket.
friends like that, for sure.
Yeah, lean on me. If I have something I can do, if I have a ticket to space, just call me. You got it. So yeah, how did first of all, just I'm curious how you reacted to the news. What'd you think of that? Are you headed in space when you can?
I would be willing to go to space. I'm looking for a billionaire to sponsor me. But look, I heard that there's a lot of things involved. I heard that they climbed Mount Rainier in May. They involved, several hours of studies and simulations. They had a zero gravity airplane flight, which is obviously nausea inducing. They had centrifuge sessions. They had high G jet maneuvers. After hearing all that, I was like, maybe I should rethink my plan.
Okay, fair enough. So this is the first time the Earth has been orbited by a crew of all civilians, as they say, no professional astronauts. The pilot is a geology professor, but apparently the spacecraft essentially navigates itself. Now, a downside is they are exposed to more radiation than the International Space Station astronauts, so they're definitely monitoring their health. But if all goes well, they splash down on Saturday, and in January, SpaceX is supposed to send 4 more people, possibly Renee, if you can get over your objections.
Yes, please.
4 more people to the International Space Station, and Tom Cruise is scheduled to fly to the station for a movie project next
Interesting.
year. Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Well,
and by the way, Jeff Bezos said a nice tweet. He's had some snark with Elon Musk, but Jeff Bezos congratulated them, said it's another step towards a future where space is accessible to all of us. Okay, so let's get back to the earthly news as we do here on the Week in Review. We've got a new poll out from a very well-respected longtime Seattle pollster showing that Bruce Harrell is leading the Seattle mayoral race among likely voters. Out of 400 likely voters, 42% said they for now plan to vote for Harrell. 27% say they plan to vote for City Council President Lorena Gonzalez, but 24% are still undecided. And the polls got, an error rate, plus or minus 5 percentage points. And the election is, 7 weeks away or so, November 3rd. So I respect this pollster, Stuart Elway. I also find myself taking election polls less seriously than I used to. I'm curious what my journalist friends here, what do you think of this poll? What does it say to you?
Well, the first thing I'd remind you of is that people get their ballots in the mail, I think, on the 15th of October. So it's not a full 7 weeks away. People can start voting really in less than a month.
Yes. Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, thanks.
And it looks like we have a couple of contrasting polls here. The Crosscut Elway poll gives Bruce Harrell a clear lead. And pretty quickly, the Gonzalez campaign released a poll, and really just one page of their poll showing that the race was tied at 45% each. That seems to imply there's almost nobody undecided, which isn't usually, I think, the case at this early stage. I suspect there are far more people who are still really undecided or not quite completely decided in this race.
Yeah, I'm glad Essex brought up the Gonzalez poll because I do believe that there are a great number of progressive voters who have yet to make a decision. And also, I think these are not the kind of people, at least the people I know, who participate in polls. They don't take calls from block numbers, or, they believe they're trying to be sold something, so they just hang up the phone. I'm really looking forward to this race. I think it's going to be a real referendum on the city of Seattle and the values of the voters. I know there was a lot of people who were concerned about the protest, COVID-19, and obviously the mandates, as well as homelessness. And I think some of those people want to get back to the way they perceive things were, even if those things don't work for a lot of people here in Seattle, including those that are homeless, who are concerned about bias policing. But so I think there is a shift to more conservative values, more traditional values. And I think Bruce Harrell represents that candidate those people would be most attracted to.
I feel like this race is a little bit of a deja vu from 2019, where you had a slate of more sort of pragmatic progressives, and then a slate of more ideological progressives. And that, according to the campaign consultant I've talked to, the race was tilting, particularly the Shama Sawant, Egan Ogoyan race in Capitol Hill was tilted more towards a pragmatic kind of a centrist approach. But then Amazon, remember, dropped in that big pile of money, and it became a referendum basically on people hating big tech. We don't have that this time around. The Chamber of Commerce actually folded up its PAC, and the other factor we have in this race is that, unlike 2019, you really have an increase in gun violence. There is a genuine concern about violence. And in addition to that, the number of tents on the street, I believe our Project Homeless teams reported, it increased 50% during the pandemic. So homelessness was always visible in Seattle, but it became much more so in the pandemic. So if you're thinking about a referendum about the status quo, where Seattle has leaned progressively more and further left over the past, since about 2013 or so, it would seem to be, leaning more towards the sort of the pragmatic, more centrist candidates. I think Bruce Harrell sort of fashioned himself in, Sarah Nelson in the citywide council race, and maybe also in the city attorney's race, and I'm not sure how progressive Ann Davidson is. But that said, that we also have the recent history in Seattle going the opposite direction. So this is going to be a really fascinating race to watch.
And Jonathan mentioned the gun violence. And we got to remember, because of the pandemic, more people have been buying guns. So there are more guns on the streets than there were previous. And so that is leading to more gun violence and gun deaths. Obviously in Seattle, we've seen, unfortunately, a very one after another, which is obviously very alarming, and I would imagine very alarming to the voters. So I definitely think that is playing a role in this race.
I would also say, though, that the progressives in this race come with strong bases and strong grassroots campaigns. And a Nikita Oliver, who is well known and will have a strong campaign, is going to bring out a lot of voters who are not going to be Bruce Harrell voters.
Mm-hmm.
And the democracy vouchers in play in this race also probably benefits the more populist candidates like Nikita Oliver, where you get an ability to fundraise with an army of volunteers. So that has really been a game changer for Seattle politics as well.
I knew I was forgetting something. Those democracy vouchers, got to get those in.
Right. So, all right, we'll keep following the election races. I wonder, outside of Seattle to DC, I wonder, did anyone read that BuzzFeed piece about Seattle's Congress member Pramila Jayapal supposedly being very hard on her employees? I wonder what you, Jonathan, you're nodding. What did you think of that piece?
Well, I have the pleasure of directing the investigations team for the Seattle Times, and I tell you, if we were going to run that, we would have done a lot more sourcing. The anonymous sourcing is interesting, but you need more sources for every anonymous source you have. The framing of it, of course, is interesting. It's basically, is Pramila Jayapal a hypocrite, advocating for workers in the campaign and on the floor of the House, but behind doors, she's a terrible boss. On the other hand, Maria Cantwell has had this reputation for a number of years, really run through staff, and it feels like the quality of the treatment of staff is a little bit of an inside baseball kind of thing. It's not the kind of thing that a voter is going to vote on. But I think if we see the turnover in Jayapal's office continuing to be extraordinarily high, then that might be something more for the future.
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan here 100%. I know that she's one of the highest profile progressives in Congress. She's chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So she is going to be sensitive to this, and I expect we'll see some minor changes in her office. However, DC is known as, providing tough conditions and low pay in these kind of positions. And so when BuzzFeed, interviewed all these anonymous staffers, I honestly don't think it'll damage her political trajectory at all. In fact, in 2020, she won by 83% of the vote. And I expect to see her opponent in the next election obviously bring this up, but I don't think it's going to have any impact on the election overall.
In that BuzzFeed story, they quote Jayapal's chief of staff on the record, and the chief of staff makes a point about this being the kind of sexist microscope that women leaders can be put under. I do think it still matters how advocates for workers treat their own employees. And we've really yet to hear from Representative Jayapal herself on that. I and other reporters have asked, and we would still like to hear from her.
Yeah, well, I suppose if you are, Jonathan used the word hypocrite. I know these don't line up. Your gender, race, your identity doesn't necessarily line up with how progressive you are. But if someone is seen as very much on the worker's side, and then they are said to be a tough boss, I wonder if it opens up that from a media point of view, it makes the story that much more interesting enough to run with it, that you're going to be prone to the hypocrite lead that gets this sent around.
Sure. I think that Renee's point too about DC being a tough place to work, low pay, long hours, high pressure. And frankly, we know many politicians who are not good bosses. Winning office and being a good manager are two very different things. So I kind of wondered too, we see that the millennial generation has a different attitude about what has been tolerated in previous generations in the workplace. I wonder if there might be a little bit of a sort of a generational sort of reckoning that's coming with younger staff, and frankly, it's probably a lot of younger staff because they're low paid, just not willing to be tolerate the BS that has historically come with these jobs.
Yeah, that's probably, frankly, one thing to admire in them and the younger staff of a lot of different organizations, including news organizations, not being willing to tolerate some of the things that some of us with a little more gray hair had tolerated in the past.
I've definitely had that discussion. I remember I started at KUOW when I was in college, and I remember being in tears, when the news director would walk away after just basically saying, "What the hell is this copy? This story makes no sense," all that kind of stuff. And I would be fighting. Yeah. And I'd be fighting back tears. And I have mixed feelings about it, sort of for better and for worse. I didn't think of it as bad boss, and I didn't think of it as terrible me. I have no self-esteem either. I just was frustrated. Like, why am I not getting this? And I'm not good. And it should be better next time. So I have mixed feelings about the effect that kind of, she didn't strike me, my boss. She just was extreme. She didn't even yell. These days, man, if someone speaks sternly, we say that they yelled. And if they yelled, we say they screamed. And I don't remember it that way. It seemed fair to me, but man, it was hard.
The dues paying thing has for DC, one of the sort of career path for DC for Hill staffers is that you tolerate the bad work conditions and low pay for a few years, and then you cash out and go take a nice paying job and based on your experience on the Hill. So that's been one of the sort of the models. But I genuinely admire the more finely tuned moral compass of younger staffers. It's certainly younger people in the workplace. It's certainly that's a direct through line to the Me Too movement. That was women saying what was been tolerated in the past is just not tolerable now. And so kudos.
Agreed. I was used to it, and there's a better, also professional way to handle that situation. So glad we keep thinking this through. Well, the ballots get mailed out to voters in mid-October, as we said. So we'll keep watching this election develop with Cairo 7 politics and government reporter Essex Porter, Seattle Times investigations editor Jonathan Martin, with the Seattle Gay News, Tacoma Weekly, and the Capitol Hill Seattle blog. Hardworking contributing writer Renee Raketty is with us. We are streaming the show on Facebook and YouTube, and we're going to be right back and continue with more of the Week in Review. Don't go away.
Support for KUOW comes from Seattle Mini in Lake City, a family-owned business since 2009, now with a wide selection of certified pre-owned minis that come with scheduled maintenance. Seattle Mini in Lake City or seattlemini.com.
55 degrees in Seattle, where we expect to top out at 67 today. The forecast says rain likely, and I would have to agree with that. Looks like rain overnight as well, with a low in the mid 50s. Saturday and Sunday, both showers with the possibility of thunderstorms, and daytime highs kind of in the mid 60s.
Support for KUOW comes from Longhouse Memory Care, providing full care households for seniors with dementia. Longhouse believes that humans thrive in smaller environments. Learn more about memory care households for seniors in Bothell and Northgate at longhouse.com.
It's 12:47, and lucky you, you're listening to KUOW's Week in Review.
This is Bill Radke. Good to have you along with us. We are figuring out what happened this week and what it all means. The Seattle City Council's writing its budget, which includes how much to pay police officers next year. About 250 officers have left the department in the past year and a half. They quit or retired, and that leaves extra money in the budget, about $15 million. How much of that should go toward more hiring and retention bonuses over time for the police department? How much should be shifted away from the police department to other community safety groups and other nonprofits and organizations? Well, the City Council took public comment over Zoom this week. This is Sylvie Reynolds from Green Lake saying she wants to see more police in town.
This place is lawless. We have an open drug market, people getting shot very close to an elementary school during the day. And so I support that. You all support this bill. Thank you.
But most of the commenters opposed using $3 million for hiring bonuses and retention. This is Annette Clapstein.
I have lived in or near Seattle for most of the past 50 years, and throughout that time, the Seattle Police Department has been brutal and racist. No reforms have worked, and they have only gotten worse.
In the end, the City Council voted to spend about $10 million of those $15 million extra dollars on police. No money for hiring bonuses. Overtime is cut in half. The city will spend the other $5 million for non-SPD uses, including the Regional Peacekeepers Collective to prevent gun violence, community safety programs proposed by local nonprofits, expanding evidence storage. So I'll start with you, Essex. Your take on the decision and the debate this week.
You know, I listened to that hearing. I covered it, and I managed to get through about a half hour of public testimony. And I never heard of the woman from Green Lake. That public testimony was just overwhelmingly against the idea of providing money for retention bonuses or recruitment bonuses. Now, yes, there's clearly a large swath of public that would like to see that. They just didn't call into the hearing. That was a rare take there that you were able to play. Even though a divided council voted against the hiring and retention bonuses, the council consistently points out that they have given the Seattle Police Department all of the money it has asked for this year to hire as many people as the department believes it can hire this year. So it's not like the department cannot hire replacement officers, but they were unwilling to go further with recruitment or retention bonuses.
Yeah, and the SPD will have plenty of money for community service officers, crime prevention coordinators, as well as the staff they need to speed up hiring. So non-police funding includes money for community organizations working to reduce crime as well. So this is definitely a shift from the way we've done business in the past. I think the majority of people in Seattle seem to support that. Obviously, the council vote was 5-4 on Peterson's proposal, but it's clear that the city is looking to go a different direction. I think we've seen that in some of the efforts that the mayor's made in trying to reduce the amount of police on the streets when it comes to nonviolent, instances, issues.
The alternative to policing funding has gone up significantly, particularly since the protests last summer. But you see right now we're in kind of this bad middle place where the number of officers is dropping. Remember, just a few years ago, the city council had funded 1,500 sworn officers. We never got there, and I think we're down to about 1,300 now. But if you think about it, the need for officers is partly what is the needs of your responses. And one of the key things we're hearing from people is that the sort of the mental health crises on the street are not being responded to. You had really good reporting this week from David Croman and Crosscut, and my colleague Danny Westneat had a good column about the difficulty of running a business in Pioneer Square. From the Crosscut piece, the involuntary commitments are down 45% in August from a historic from the norm. So people are not being sent to hospital for emergency psychiatric treatment. The idea would be that you would have an alternative response, people, non-sworn officers responding. The city council has said they're doing that, but their pilot program is $700,000, which is just like, it's kind of budget dust for a budget as large as the city council, the city has. So we are not seeing the traditional response in part because of the exodus of officers and the difficulty of hiring, and you're not seeing really the alternative being stood up either. So when people are saying they're frustrated on the streets, I think this really goes back to like a very kind of poor kind of whiplash planning by the city council.
Jonathan, why do you think that is, that the council wouldn't be standing up a more robust alternative program and more quickly before they decide how well that program is working and what to do about policing?
That is that is the question to ask, Bill. I'm not sure. I think that it's probably very hard to stand up one of these programs. It takes a lot of planning and effort. The Black Lives Matter protest last summer clearly like changed the direction of policing in Seattle. Credit to the folks who were out on the street. But if you're going to take this hard change towards a more alternative policing model, it would really behoove the city to act with haste quickly. You have not seen them do that in nearly the scale they need to on the homelessness crisis. And I feel like this is just sort of more of the same of posturing, but poor planning for the consequences.
I think there's also just some practical logistics that are playing a role in this. Apparently there is a shortage of mental health workers. There's a shortage of the kind of people who can do this kind of work. You can't go out and hire a batch of them in a week. And so it's difficult for the city to stand up alternatives as quickly as you might reduce or refocus the police department.
Yeah, Lisa Herbold announced her Triage 1 program, which hopefully will divert calls away from the police. Obviously, the fire department has its Health 1, which tries to handle less acute calls. Obviously, it's going to take time to get these things up to make them robust. I do want to mention, though, that a lot of the 200 officers that are leaving the department are simply retiring. And unfortunately, a lot of young people these days don't want to join the police force for one reason or another. So there is basically a heavy hill ahead, for those that are trying to recruit for the Seattle Police Department. So good luck to them.
Yes, indeed. You're listening to Week in Review on KUOW. We are coming toward the end of our program. I saw some, actually, I hadn't heard this yet, Renee, until you pointed it out to me, that a Seattleite is the new co-host of Jeopardy till the end of the year.
Yes, Ken Jennings.
How do you feel about it? Yeah, how do you feel about that?
Well, congratulations to Ken Jennings. I mean, he won like 74 games. I mean, he's the biggest winner on the show. So clearly, I'm glad to see him. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to take the show forward, especially with all the controversy that has been surrounding the hosts of the show, and their executive producer.
However, Ken has also made some jokes that have annoyed some people.
He has some.
And I know Ken a little. As a disclosure, I know him a little bit socially. I really like him, but just pointing that out. Yes, go on, Renee.
Plus, he's a co-host. He's a temporary co-host.
Yes, right.
With me and Bialik.
He'll just take them to the end of the year. So that's it.
Yeah.
However, I was team LeVar Burton, so I'm a little disappointed. And apparently, he may not be in the running for the permanent job. He did tell Trevor Noah on the Daily Show on Thursday that he doesn't plan to seek it. That he is kind of move past that. So that's disappointing to me, but I love Jeopardy, so I'll continue to watch.
You got a socially distanced high five from Essex there.
Great.
Was that about LeVar Burton?
That was about LeVar Burton. I think he needs to be persuaded to reconsider. I think he would also be a great co-host of Jeopardy.
But I keep hearing about the nerd credentials. Ken Jennings is a trivia nerd, and Bialik has nerd credentials. But I never thought of Alex Trebek as nerdy. I just thought he was a professional, affable game show host. He wasn't really the star, at least to me. I just took him. I'm not used to all this debate over who the host should be. I thought of the host as so neutral and just kind of wallpaper in a nice way.
I don't think Alex Trebek was, back there writing questions. Clearly there's a whole team of people behind these folks. So I don't think they need to be a nerd necessarily and know all these facts, in their brain.
Yeah. Just be a game show host.
Exactly.
All right. Well, anything else making you smile before we go? Always like to leave on a smile. Jonathan, any happy news this week?
Well, returning to a theme I've hit before and we can review, it's fresh hop beer season. The freshly cut hops are making their way over the Cascades right now. And
did they get enough water? Did they get enough rain? Are they okay?
Sounds like it is a decent hop season. So that'll be that's a uniquely Northwest thing. We're the hop capital of the country, and having this ability to have these fresh hop beers is a real treasure of fall.
I would like to have a beer with each of you in person one of these days. For now, it is what it is. And it's time to go. We've been reviewing the news of the week with Renee Raketty from Seattle Gay News, Tacoma Weekly, and the Capitol Hill Seattle blog, and also with Cairo 7's government and politics reporter, Essex Porter, and Seattle Times investigations editor, Jonathan Martin. It's been a real pleasure being with you. You made me smarter about what's going on in this town, and thanks a lot, and let's do this again soon.
Good weekend, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, enjoy the rain, enjoy all of it. Good weekend, and thank you to our co-workers here, Tio Popescu and Juan Pablo Chiquiza, who make it possible that we can do our social media and live streaming. We've got our show producers, Alec Cowan and Sarah Leibovitz, and I'm your host, Bill Radke. Looking forward to another Week in Review a week from now. See you then.
Support for KUOW comes from the law firm of Miller Nash, a new name and
Thank you,
website
everyone.
with the same.
Really
Thank you so
appreciate
much,
it.
Bill. Had a great time.
Hey, Renee, nice to meet you.
Yes.
Good to see you again, Essex.
It's good to see you, Jonathan, and nice to meet you, Renee. And,
Thank you, Essex.
Had a great time.
We gotta have lunch with Deborah Horn one day.
Oh, I'm sorry, what'd you say about?
We gotta have lunch with Deborah Horn one day.
Deborah Horn is the queen.
She is. She is.
I love Deborah Horn too. Tell her hi.
Me too.
All right.